Welcome back to the Lanterne Rouge Cycling Podcast for the recap of the Giro d'Italia Stage 14. This coverage, as always, is presented by Zwift, the online cycling platform that makes training fun. 148k stage with a circuit from Sant'Anna to Turin. So the circuit they do is incredibly difficult. They have the Superga 5Ks, 8.2%, followed by Colle della Maddalena, 3.6 Ks, 7.3%. They do that twice. The descents are technical. The finish has a little kicker called the Parco del Nobile with an intermediate sprint with bonus there, and then there's a sort of descent to the finish. So those climbs, like the Superga has a 10% section at the start. The Maddalena is very, very hard. It's like 12.5% for the first K, 9.2% for the second K. Incredibly steep gradients. So would a break win? Would Yates go on the break with Formolo and Bauke Mollema? Would GC teams try with perhaps Almeida on the ropes with riders in the break like Formolo, etc.? But before we get to where it really kicked off, a word on our show partners, Zwift. If you want to get stronger on the bike in any season, any conditions, maybe even when it's too hot to train outside, particularly during the day watching the Giro, it's a heat wave in Europe right now, then Zwift is your best indoor cycling partner. If you want to check out Zwift and get a free 7-day trial, you can go to the link down below to Zwift.com. Thanks to Zwift, as always, for being the presenting sponsor of LRCP. An interesting stage, pretty much from the start, Benji, with another MVP attack out of the neutral zone.
Yeah, quite certainly. The similar attack to the one he did a few days ago, where he tried riding alone in front of the peloton, hoping that a breakaway would form behind him. Eventually, that was not the attack that would make the breakaway happen, because his first hour of this race was people fighting for a breakaway. And the thing that I said before the stage started on Twitter was that the only thing I feared when I looked at this parkour is that the initial part was a bit flat, and that I feared that we might see an easy breakaway getaway. But that was not the case. That was completely the opposite, because that breakaway did not get away until like starting the first proper climb on this parkour. And that's when we saw riders like Diego Rosa going in the breakaway once again for his blue jersey points, the KOM jersey. And he's doing pretty well in that classification. I think he's like on like 90 plus points or something first. But anyway, so he's pretty safe in that. But the GC riders can pick that up as well if they start winning a lot in the last week. When it comes to the other riders that eventually got into a rather large breakaway, it included some riders that you'd say, okay, this is someone that is actually of proper caliber. Like, for example, we saw Alessandro Covi from UAE, like you mentioned, which is a teammate of Almeida and is ahead in this race, together with also Ivan Sosa, teammate of Valverde in the breakaway here. We see the rider like Ben Zwiha from Bora-Hansgrohe. They tried a few times, these teams, trying to get other riders in the breakaway. I think Formolo tried for UAE, but Covi was the one that eventually ended up being in the breakaway. And I think those are the most important names really in that breakaway. There were other riders like Dombrowski and Zana and so forth. And even Cor Vos, rider from Groupama. And god damn, that guy was good today. Jesus Christ, he was a godlike climber today. And like, you would expect this man to like perhaps stay with Demar today and try and get him safely to the line. But no, Groupama said, we're going to try and get somebody in the breakaway. They tried with Walter. They failed with Walter. Kono Valovas was the man that was in there, and hell of a ride by that man. But hey, then action would start kicking up in the peloton a bit later.
If you see a team with a rider in the breakaway and then they start pacing behind, it means that they mean business. And that's exactly what Bora-Hansgrohe meant today. Pacing hard with, I don't know, who initially started pacing for them, Benji? It was on descent. They were working to bring it back. Aliotti, he's a good sort of young Italian rider. And then they eventually catch the breakaway as they start the Superga climb with Almeida, Martin, and Valverde struggling. But before then, they call Zwihoff back, and they're getting Zwihoff to work. He was a satellite rider, but UAE didn't call Covey back, at least quickly, Benji. This seemed to be a repeat to me of the Hirschi Basque Country Stage 6, where the car is really slow to react to a dangerous situation, calling riders back.
Yeah, and I'd like to even pull it back a bit earlier. It was Bora that, like you said, took that up in that descent before we got to that Superga climb, and that's when Almeida was having trouble. Almeida was not positioned in the right place, so that either mentions that he was personally involved in not being in the right position that he needed to be in, or the team didn't prepare him in the first place to be in the right position at that point in the race. But when he is in a bad position and is on a gap, because at a certain point, I swear I saw Bora right at the front with Carapaz, a rider from Ineos, and Simon Yates in their wheel. And that was it for a second. And then groups started going back left and right with some other GC riders and so forth. But like you mentioned, they end up calling Zwift back before UAE makes a decision of calling Corvi back to help out Almeida. So, in my opinion, this is a complete tactical fuck up from them, from UAE, because if you look at the time that Almeida has to spend chasing himself even before Corvi is even called back, it's insane how slow they responded to that. And the first thing I thought about the second that Almeida was not in that front group was Corvi needs to be called back. And the fact that they didn't do that instantly, they either trusted the other riders with him to bring him back themselves, which I didn't. And after that, they kind of left him for himself, because I saw a view from behind the group that Almeida was in, just before the Superga, with Almeida pacing, with Formula sitting up in like fourth wheel or something. And perhaps Formula had paced beforehand. Perhaps Formula was planning to pace on Superga. I think a rider from UAE was pacing on Superga. I don't know if it was Corvi from the breakaway then, or someone that was sitting with Almeida. But all in all, I think that they were very slow to respond. They weren't prepared for something to happen in that situation. And yeah, Almeida spent so much energy trying to come back to the group of Carapaz and Bora there.
Yeah, so he saves it. If he doesn't get to that group before the top of this is the first Superga climb, he could be losing minutes because his descending is horrendous, like Martinez level, absolutely horrific. It plagued him the entire stage. And there's a false flat, a descent, and Kelderman, this was like Vuelta Stage 20 last year. If a team like Bora has Kelderman, a strong rider pacing, Bahrain had Padun and Maida, you will get cooked and you can lose minutes. So he saved his Giro on that Superga climb, just Almeida. But then it was Kelderman just pacing the entire time, pacing the first Colle della Maddalena, and just really destroying the race for Carthy, Valverde, Aronsman, the main guys that missed it. But no one in the top 5 or top 6 had really missed it. Juanpe Lopez El Patron was still there. He took a bid on, didn't like what was in it, threw it down, or the musette.
Dangerous, to be honest.
It was actually. I think Valverde changed bike with the car in front, which also isn't allowed. Not sure if he'll get disqualified or not, like Ganna did in Provence. But here's where I kind of had problems with Bora done a great job. They've activated the race. They have 3 in the first group. Bookman and Hindley are really close on GC and threats. And they get to the base of the Superga, and I'm not sure, they never showed the front on camera shot, whether it was Carapaz or Hindley who attacked first. And Kelderman pulls off. Great job by him. But Bookman's gone. And so their strength in numbers pretty much evaporated, and it become a man-on-man battle between Juanpe, Nibali, Landa, Carapaz, and Hindley with Bookman drop. What would you have done if you were Bora with that group of 8 with only Landa with a teammate?
Well, it looked like they tried to actually form a bit of an attack there. It looked like they were setting something up, because from the back angle, I saw that the second Bora rider, which in that position was Buchmann was behind Hindley at the moment of that attack. And Buchmann seemed to lose the wheel, perhaps on purpose, when Hindley made a move and Carapaz jumped to his wheel. So I was like, they're trying to set something up. They're trying to see if Hindley can get away here. But I think if you have 3 riders in a group, then you need to try and use that as much as possible to, get a rider ahead and try and force others to have to chase that rider. kind of get that feeling? Because now they kind of kept pacing with Kelderman until they had to do something with one of their other two riders. And then you're creating a situation where you're against two riders from Bahrain, still in the group, for example, unless you attack at that point, which they did with Hindley. And I don't know. I would have expected them to play out the numerical advantage more beforehand.
Yeah, and maybe even losing a wheel on the descent, because it's, even if Bookman didn't have it, which he didn't lose loads of time, but even if he didn't really have it to do a proper attack, just even a bait attack, just to get Carapaz to respond at the base of Superga, just so Hindley's on the wheel and can counter, because Hindley was, I think, the strongest on the climbs today, the strongest on the descents, and seemed to have the most energy at the end of the stage too. But the problem was, if you attack at the base of the second last Superga with Carapaz in the wheel, you have to be ridiculously better to get a gap, and that didn't happen. Maybe Carapaz, again, haven't seen the front on shot. Maybe he's like, let me make this a one-on-one battle, and he attacked to get rid of Almeida and Bookman straight away.
Yeah, and also for Jan Heert, of course, the man, the myth, the legend of February, also still in that group, dropping at that point, Pozzo Vivo as well. So multiple riders were affected by that move. Landa was indeed the stronger, like you mentioned, but can we talk about Lo Squalo dello Stretto, Vincenzo Nibali being able to follow that move? Like, crazy stuff. And I felt like whenever I was looking at Vincenzo Nibali in this race, I think he had the issue that he was being somewhat desperate to win, to the point where he was willing to close every single move on climbs. Did you have the same feeling?
I don't know if he's riding for third. Is he riding for the podium on GC? He's on 3 minutes. And with
Mm-hmm.
these legs, if he's like, maybe if Hindley and Carapaz, who he was with, they're there on Superga, they've dropped Landa, Juanpe Lopez has dropped, Almeida's dropped. He's like, if we three go and we take 2 minutes, I'm on for a podium in GC, which is bigger than a stage, in my
Yeah.
opinion, and the legs he's had on Blockhouse and here are ridiculous. So I think he was caught in two minds, whereas Yates was 100% stage all day following, not initiating. And it came back with Carapaz neutralizing Hindley. They'd thrown a couple of attacks at each other, and Landa comes back. Bilbao comes back. Bookman even comes back, and he does try a feint attack. And as Benji mentioned, it was closed by Nibali. But before we get into the last Colle della Maddalena, GCN Plus is the supporting sponsor of LRCP's Giro coverage, and tomorrow is a stage I think you have to tune into. After today's action, the last stage before the second rest day, it's got two Cat 1s and a 20k mountaintop finish. I can't wait to see what happens. And if you want to tune in, GCN has the live coverage and on-demand highlights in every location that GCN Plus is available except New Zealand. You can get 25% off if you're in Australia, Canada, US, UK, and Germany through the link down below. Group comes back together on Superga, the last one. It looks like Landa's put Bilbao on the front to pace, and Carapaz attacks Benji. No one responds, and he's immediately given 15 seconds. And it's a long way to the finish, but he's attacked this long before. 25Ks to the finish with the steep Colle della Maddalena to come. I really like the attack, because if you are isolated, you will be attacked with Bilbao on the descent possibly, or Buchmann on the descent, or Hindley. I don't know. I really liked it.
I firmly agree. He's done this before. Like, he's done this before and it has failed a few times because other teams started conspiring against him, like Movistar in that Tour de France attack, I think last year. And then the chasing group in that was a Tinia stage as well, was able to catch him again. But looking at this attack, it was at the moment near the top of that Superga climb. He was able to get the initial gap already because no one initially responded, and the acceleration was fast enough to get a gap so that other riders just started looking at each other, and Buchmann wasn't looking too outrageous after what happened on the previous climbs, and Hindley was kind of looking at Buchmann, and then Bahrain was looking at, well, Bilbao, and yeah, like that. And Nibali won't take over in that situation unless he's really, really desperate to try and do something here, but it wouldn't be a good tactical choice to do so. So eventually he got a gap of 15, 17 seconds instantly before they basically kept that up, that same gap until they started that Maddalena climb. And that's where action started kicking again. Like, these percentages on that Madalena climb, pretty damn solid. It's the same climb they did before. And now it was not really the attack of like a Bora or a Bahrain that did something there. Vincenzo Nibali tried again. He tried doing something again at the bottom of that Madalena, kind of a, not necessarily like a fierce attack, but that typical Nibali kick where he kind of ups the speed a tiny bit and checks how everybody is doing. And Hindley was able to follow so easily there. And I thought, okay, well, Nibali, if you get over this Madalena climb, descends the line, mate. Well, there's a little hill in the end, but descents are your thing, mate. Just hold on to whatever Hindley does and make sure you get closer to Carapaz. And Nibali was closing Carapaz down to 9 seconds with Hindley in the wheel, and then Hindley snaps away. And Nibali was on a gap, and I started getting fearful. The inner Benji Nibali fan was getting tears in his eyes. And, well, he was doing a bit of an Almeida. Let's be honest about it. He was dropping, but when Hindley caught up with Carapaz, the tempo goes down, and Nibali slowly but surely makes his way back. At that point, did you see those three fighting for the stage, or was there someone else that you had in mind?
Well, Yates was coming back. He'd finally made his move on the Madalena. He'd probably sat on Pozzovivo and Almeida, who are a little bit behind, and he gets to that group. I think there's a false summit of this climb, and pretty much Carapaz, Hindley, Nibali stop a little bit. They're pacing just to keep Almeida at 15, 25 seconds, but it allows Yates to come back. And I don't know where Landa was. He lent on Bilbao a lot. They go to the top of the summit of that Madalena climb, group of 4, Yates, Carapaz, Nibali, Hindley. Nibali's the descender pedigree. Yates is no GC threat. Hindley's looked the strongest. Carapaz has just done a big effort, but you never can count him out. And there's an intermediate sprint on this last little kicker, like 3, 4, 5 Ks from the finish, the Parco del Nobile, and I thought Yates is going to go on that. He is going to attack really hard. He sat on the entire descent at the back, did not pull a turn whatsoever. On the climb, Hindley and Carapaz had to pull, and then at that intermediate sprint, Yates just lit it up. And maybe Carapaz could have gone with him or blind, and they could have chased him back.
I don't believe it.
Maybe not. Maybe not. But the decision is when you're like, I could go over my limit here for what? Like, Yates is not a GC threat, and I have Hindley in the wheels. So, yeah. So immediately
True.
they just stop. Gap goes to 10 seconds. Yates gone. And, the stage win beckons. And he does. He wins. He set his 6th Giro stage, 15 seconds ahead of Hindley, who won the bunch sprint again. He's looking very snappy, Hindley. Carapaz 3rd. Nibali 4th. One of the best stages this year. I would really recommend go GCN Plus. Watch the last 50 Ks. If you have 2-3 hours this weekend, incredible stage. Pozzo 5th on 28. That's only 13 seconds behind the Hindley Carapaz Nibali group. Ridiculous. Almeida 6th. He got dropped by Pozzovivo on the descent. He is Martinez level bad, maybe worse. He is on the hoods the entire descent. He is heavier than Pozzo, getting dropped on a -3% straight section. Like, there's something wrong with his descending, Almeida. Seriously, it's like physiologically.
Obviously, Remco is a better descender. People won't like hearing it, but easily a better descender than Almeida, because Remco is not actually that bad of a descender these days anymore. But it feels like Almeida has gone backwards, and I'd argue perhaps that's there's equipment things where he's like, he doesn't trust the equipment here as much as he did with Quickstep. But back in the day with Quickstep, he also wasn't the most godlike descender. I swear, last year, Alpe Mota, the descent beforehand, he dropped. Was it in Emilia this year, or was it last year that he ended up like dropping in between the hills?
And Passo Giao descent, I need to look at the numbers. I think he was very slow there as well. That was a wet sort of technical descent from high altitude. But there's bad descenders where you're like, oh, that guy will never attack. But if you are competent enough, like, he's so bad that literally Landa can say to Bilbao, I'm being serious, like, Landa can say to Bilbao, just go on the descent and increase the pressure in this group of 10. And he will drop from a group of 10 without like a massive Nibali descent attack. And then if there's 9 in a valley with domestiques, the energy you have to put in chasing to get back on, which he does 90% of the time, it's got to cost something. So it's a real problem for Almeida, but he saved it still, only 24 seconds behind the Hindley group after being dropped on the first Superga. Just ridiculous. Landa 7th on 51 with Bilbao, Buchmann 9th, JP Lopez lost a lot. He was on 4 minutes 25.
El Patron Juanpe!
He's
No!
dead. Valverde 8:04. Where Guillaume Martin 9:37, he's going to need to go back in a break to get that time back. Aronsman mooted to sign with Ineos. He lost 10 minutes today. That'll be a bit concerning for
Had
them.
a bit of bad luck, but also he was initially already not in the split. So regardless of that bad luck, he wouldn't have made it in that front group either. But Valverde as well. Valverde was coming back to get with Almeida, but was dropped by Almeida at the bottom of the Superga climb when they were catching up to the group of Bora, and then Valverde ended up doing that illegal bike change that you mentioned. I don't think, regardless of that bike change, I think Valverde would have lost time today, and he kept bleeding time towards the top of Superga as well afterwards. But like, there's so many stories to this stage. The attacks of Bora there. We've got the resurrection of Vincenzo Nibali, or the continued resurrection. He was kind of already pretty good on Blockhouse, can we say. Consolation prize for Simon Yates, who on one end will be happy with winning the stage, but on the other hand, he will know that this was not what he came to the Giro for. And then you look at the tactical fuck up of UAE, for example, and the descending of Almeida, Pozzo doing so well. There's so many small stories here, and yeah, I once again want to give a bit of an appreciation message for the man himself, El Patron Juanpe, a man that we might not have seen as glorious as he became during this Giro before the Giro, but he certainly proved himself a real leader, a supreme leader of the peloton in this race. Despite he seems like he's a bit of an impulsive guy, you know, throwing beat-ons at people, throwing beat-ons on the floor. I don't know. There's some pattern there going on.
Well, yeah, people should just make sure they get things right for him, and then there won't be any problems. The GC, though, upturned. Well, I say upturned. Actually, not really. Juanpe is the man that goes. For all Bora invested today, they gained 1 second on Carapaz with Hindley because Carapaz took a second at the intermediate on Hindley, and Hindley took 2 seconds on him in the finish. Buchmann loses, I think, a minute on Carapaz. They gain some time on Almeida, 23 seconds from Hindley to Almeida. Is this a win for Bora after all they invested today, Benji?
It's hard to say, but I think reacting on this right now is in complete hindsight, because when I was watching it during the race, I was feeling like they were upsetting the race completely and that this would be ending very well for them. But their competitors just kept holding on. So is that perhaps because of the fact that they didn't play out their numerical value enough, their advantage there on that second Superga? Perhaps there's something there. But I'm just happy that they did what they did, because they made the stage so much better. But you're right. They didn't gain too much. They invested a lot of energy. The next 2 days won't be easy. Will it be too much? That's something we'll see in the coming days. But if you don't try, you won't win.
What was the point of Buchmann? Why was Hindley, by the way, before the last Superga, no, before Colle della Maddalena, why was Hindley pulling on the flat when Buchmann was in the group? Now, maybe he couldn't pull.
Perhaps Buchmann was done.
Perhaps, but he only lost a minute doing the entirety of Maddalena and the descent solo. So, like, really? He couldn't pull on the flat, and yet they didn't use him as a second GC threat in the stage to attack, really, either? Like, I didn't get it. Hindley, I think, was the strongest on the stage.
Yeah.
He was so good on the climbs and descents.
Is there something there that they wanted to try something here, but didn't feel like offering up their second GC rider Buchmann completely, and therefore didn't risk him completely in the final of the stage somehow to keep him up there in GC?
I mean, yeah, but they're using Hindley to pace.
Yeah, makes no sense. You're right.
After that's why the Carapaz move wasn't so bad. Like, it's possible Hindley with a lead out and resting drops him on that final climb. It's possible. Hindley was looking really good if Nibali attacked. B, Yes, it wasn't ideal. If Bilbao wasn't there and couldn't respond, it's possible that he takes 35, 40 seconds, but Bilbao kept it. But see, he was basically riding a 1-up TT against Hindley for like part of it. So yeah, I don't really think he lost a relative advantage or was losing to Hindley in that scenario too much. At least got ahead of the race. And yeah, he basically eliminated them, like Lander and Bilbao and Buchmann and Hindley, putting him in a difficult situation. But what do you think about GC now, Benji? Carapaz goes into the Maglia Rosa, slender lead, Ineos absent today, Sivakov and Port, Castroviejo not there. What do you see? Like Carapaz, he's great El Jaguara. He's been fighting a solo battle in Grand Tours for years. How would you feel if you were like me and you'd pick Carapaz? I'm pretty comfortable, actually.
I understand that you're pretty comfortable. Although that Hindley is looking really good as a competitor there, I'd argue that Carapaz, I trust somehow Ineos more to make the right decisions, although that Bora made a pretty solid initial decision of trying to light today's stage up to try and beat some of their competitors today. But I think if you're both Ineos or Bora camp, you should be consistent with the position that you are currently in. The only thing about Carapaz that I still have is that he wasn't able to gain time on Blockhouse, and I was expecting him to be able to. That's as simple as that. But if I'm, for example, Joao Almeida, I'm actually pretty damn happy with the outcome of today's stage, knowing how UAE was so slow to respond when he was in trouble, knowing how he had to do most of it himself to try and fix it, and that he was able to still be on 30 seconds on today's stage. Like, I'm relatively confident with that, knowing that I feel like he's better on the longer climbs than on stages like this. Do I feel like week 3 could be the savior for him? I don't know. Like, I don't think there's any stage like this anymore where it's actually like a medium mountain stage, right? There are stages where you can attack early, but I feel like it's all larger climbs. Or am I wrong?
Well, yeah, that dovetails neatly into tomorrow's stage, which, as Benji mentions, is a much more traditional mountain stage from Rivarolo Canavese to Konya, 177 Ks. And it's like uphill rolling terrain. And then they got two Cat 1s, 12.2 Ks, 7%. What's it called? Pila Les Fleurs. It's pretty steady. There's a 10% K in the middle. It levels off at the end. That'll just be a calorie burner initially. Then there's the Verona climb, 14K, 7%. Again, couple of 10% Ks in the first 4Ks, but there's some lower gradient Ks in the final. Descent, there's very little flat, like 5Ks between those two climbs, and the last climb to Konya, which is 4.5 Ks, 8%, and then it just progressively gets shallower and shallower and shallower. Middle 5Ks, I'm guesstimating, averages 6%. The last 8Ks is false flat uphill. It's like 2 to 3% the entire time. I thought this would have been a great stage for Aronsman if Bardet was still here, because he's got a lot of overall watts. He's like 70 kilos, but he's not. He's out of GC and Bardet's not here. So that's a shame. This is a climb and a stage where satellite riders can also be important, but also if you have a rider up the road, it's something that the other GC contenders will not want to pull back. This reminds me a lot of Courmayeur, the finish in 2019 when Carapaz went away and Nibali and Roglic looked at each other. It's like an annoying gradient, but it's hot. GC teams might be tired today. Bora tried today. Ineos. I expect Ineos to be better on this tomorrow, Benji.
I expect so as well, and I'm going to be the annoying guy that says that I expect nothing too crazy from GC on this stage. And the main reason being that today was such a hard stage for every single team, for every GC rider, that I'd be really surprised if someone's willing to completely obliterate tomorrow's stage again to try and set tactical things up and try and do something like that. This reminds me of that stage. What is it? Oh, there was a stage in, was it last year or the year before, where there was an uphill finish where either O'Connor or Trotnik won. I don't know which of the ones I'm referring to, but the group behind stayed somewhat together, and we had a group sprint in the peloton behind it, like a 20-man group reaching the finish line. It would not surprise me if it's like a stage like that, and I'd be looking at the breakaway for this one.
Yeah, it's certainly possible that the GC teams look at this finish and they're like, well, what are you going to do with that? You're not going to drop anyone on 2%. If you want to make a difference, you have to blow the stage up early. And I don't really see why Ineos would. Maybe they will. I mean, if I just don't trust their team at the moment. But yeah, I think this could be Simon Yates back to back, Benji. Like, it's possible that he wins tomorrow's
Yeah.
stage as well. He won, like, he was so good today. He's still so far back on GC. He took 100 UCI points, I think, in Veenendaal Classic. Groenewegen won a Dutch 1-1 race. He took 125. So Bike Exchange trying to have themselves a UCI points weekend. But you're right. I wish Dylan Turns was here because I'd pick him for the stage. Who are you going with?
It's so difficult to pick a rider for this stage because on one end I'm like looking at who lost time today, and then I'm looking at Damon Arensman, like you mentioned, as a rider that could do something. Wave Bardet was in this race from the GC group, but would he be allowed to go in the breakaway 11 minutes back? I would expect yes, but he's also not the rider that I see fighting for the breakaway initially. So, especially not on a flat start like this. So, I'm kind of like, meh. But if he's in the breakaway, he really has a chance of getting something done here. And next to that, perhaps a Koen Bouwman again. Was he in the break today, or at least at the front at some point today? Because I swear that I heard the Dutch commentators mention his name a lot. But then again, that could just be because he's Dutch. That's also a good reason for Dutch commentators to mention Koen Bouwman. But what names are you thinking of initially?
I want Kelderman in the break. He did the best teammate work ever today. Get him in the break. Maybe if you see someone struggling and Hindley's on a great day, he can be a satellite rider again. Maybe the break goes out and he can go for that elusive stage win. Maybe he's cooked after today. Guillaume Martin will get in the break, but he'll ride for GC, not for the stage. He'll just want to take time back. I'm going Formula stage win.
Okay. I actually believe that's possible on a stage like that. But I also want to mention, now that we've mentioned this stage, that I actually don't know if the time limit will have been reached by every single rider on today's stage. Apparently, they added 10 minutes to the time limit.
Yeah, they're extending it.
Oh, okay.
It's a fix, Benji. They're not going to OTL Cav or anyone. Absolutely not.
Why is there a time limit then? It makes zero sense.
If RCS OTLs the sprinters who've actually tried to stay and not left, they will never get any staying again after the stage 13. So they have to let them stay. They can come in 2 hours in. They're like, thanks
the
to
RCS is dishonoring the race by adding time to the time limit.
Time cut should be 5%. 7 minutes out. You're done.
How many rides would we have left at the end?
I think Valor would be out. So, yeah, it'd be the top 8 in GC just about, which, might be entertaining to see. But, yeah, I like Formula and Simon Yates, except he'd need to go quite early, but he went early. What was the stage? Iseran stage. He was up ahead early, but that's a beast of a climb. You need to be a serious climber, and there'll be a thinning out on that second to last climb. And I'm hoping there's GC action. No, Van Seven. Oh, come on.
Mauri's going to do it. I'm going to wave my Belgian flag tomorrow. I can feel it.
Wout van Aert would win this stage if he was here. Perfect finish for him, but he's not. But yeah, hopefully there's GC action. They spent a lot of bullets today. This has been an incredibly good race already. The margins are so tight. No rider seems to be clearly better than the other. I think it's a shame Bardet's not here, but Carapaz, Hindley, Nibali, Landa are very evenly matched. If it comes down to the GC group, you do not want to let Almeida get a gap on this finish either. He is the diesel who can just keep going on a shallow gradient finish like this. But hope you enjoyed the recap. Let us know. Do you think Carapaz made the right move going so early on the last Superga? Do you think Bora got the most out of the stage that they could have with Hindley in incredible shape? And what do you think about Joe Almeida's prospects? He's going to continue bleeding time, or will he take it back at some
No,
point?
no. He's going to win every jersey. I told you at the start, mate.
No, Rose has got Malia Azura wrapped up. And Chiclamino, I think. That'll be it. Is that mathematically possible? You can take Chiclamino?
Everything's mathematically possible as long as other people can OTL.
Hopefully. Is Juanpei even eligible for white jersey? Or Hindley? White jersey's like, you'll be 26 years old. You can take it. Anyway, that's all from us today. Check out the stage with a replay of today on GCN Plus, and we're going to go on Zwift pretty shortly. And we'll see you at the recap of stage 15 tomorrow. Ciao.